Amy Eckerly, the creative director here at the Kelch Aviation Museum in Brodhead, Wisconsin. And I'm here today to share with you a little history and a little herstory about this beautiful 1929 bird biplane. It was once owned by Anne Morrow Lindbergh, who happened to be married to Charles Lindbergh, possibly the 1920s most famous pilot. You might have heard of him. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history, a little bit about the design, and also how this airplane ended up still alive, still flying, and where it will be going next. In 1929, if you were a regular person, you'd probably seen an airplane, but never flown in one. Now, aviation had been front page news for the past decade, especially since 1927, when this nobody airmail pilot named Charles Lindbergh became the most famous person overnight when he flew the entire Atlantic Ocean all by himself in an airplane not much bigger than this. So aviation had been popular, but overnight it became an obsession. We had movies about airplanes and books and costumes and toys, and aircraft manufacturing companies started popping up all over the United States like dandelions. And that is where the Brunner-Winkle Bird aircraft company from Long Island, New York, comes into the picture. The bird biplane actually started out as an experiment, a proof of concept. A designer named Charles Perhinsey wanted to test out his theory of a sesquiplane, an upper wing that provided 70% of the wing surface area and a lower wing that provided only 30%. Now, Charles Perhinsey happened to be associated with the Waco Aircraft Company at the time, so he took a modified Waco 10 fuselage and put his wings on it to see if it would work. And it did. Actually, it worked really well, and the bird was really easy to fly. It had a slow landing and takeoff speed. It was very docile in the air. But Charles Perhinsey didn't really want to manufacture airplanes. That's where Brunner and Winkle come in. The Brunner brothers were in the auto industry, and Winkle was a World War I pilot. They did want to manufacture aircraft. So in 1929, they launched the Brunner-Winkle Bird Aircraft Company and started manufacturing these. Initially, the bird biplanes were powered by Curtiss OX-5 engines. They were water-cooled World War I era V8s. Then Bird updated in 1929 to the brand new, at the time, 5-cylinder radial, the Kinner 100 horsepower. That's what's on this airplane today. And as a matter of fact, this very engine is the one that was on it when Charles and Anne Lindbergh bought it brand new in 1929. Fun story, when they bought it, it had a 5-cylinder Kinner, but it was a 90 horsepower. They brought it back within a matter of days and said, update it, we need something bigger. So then they put this exact 100 horsepower Kinner onto the airplane, and Charles and Anne were off. Charles Lindbergh, possibly the world's most famous pilot at the time, married Anne Morrow in May of 1929. Anne had always been interested in flying, but she didn't actually know how to fly, and if you're married to the world's most famous pilot, then you have to learn how to fly. So Charles went out to try to find what he thought would be the safest and easiest to fly airplane, and he picked the bird biplane, which is kind of a big deal. At the time, Charles had flown every airplane on the market, and he picked the bird. He paid $3,500 for it, which is like $63,000 in today's market. And they got all the bells and whistles. So this cockpit, the back cockpit where Anne would have sat as the pilot in command, the seat is a little higher so that shorter Anne could see over taller Charles in the front cockpit. And that front cockpit has a seat that's a little lower so that Charles wouldn't block her view so much. So Anne Morrow Lindbergh learned to fly in this airplane.
After lessons and solo flights in several other aircraft, Anne flew her bird solo for the first time in August of 1930, shortly after purchasing it. She received her private pilot's license less than a year later in May of 1931.
At that point, the Lindberghs didn't really need the airplane anymore, so they sold it back to the Bird Aircraft Company. The Bird Aircraft Company went out of business in 1932, along with a lot of other aircraft companies that couldn't survive the Great Depression. Meanwhile, though, this airplane, 727 Yankee, passed through a handful of other owners, and eventually in 1946 it was purchased by a gentleman named Joe Fischera. Joe owned this airplane from 1946 until 2012. He restored it, he flew it, he kept it in as close to original condition as possible. And when he passed away in 2012, it was purchased by a dear friend of his family, Mike Pangia, who kept it flying on the East Coast and had it flown here to Wisconsin, and it's been on display here ever since. In 2024, he donated it to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. It flew here to be displayed, but we're not ready to fly it all the way back to Washington. The engine is 90 years old. It's a priceless American artifact. We can't do that. So instead, we're going to take it apart piece by piece, carefully pack it into a truck, and ship it off to our friends at the Smithsonian. So, extra special bonus today, I'm going to show you how to take apart the Lindbergh bird, pack it safely into a truck with the help of our restoration experts, and send it off. We're going to make the airplane level as it would be in flight so that we can more easily take the wings off. And in order to do that, we have this engine hoist. We've made a little sling in the back and we're lifting up the tail. We're going to take off the propeller because it won't fit in the truck. Now we come to the part where we actually take things apart, which is a little bit scary. There's just nothing quite like the feeling of taking apart a priceless artifact. You learn a lot about an airplane taking it apart. You learn a lot about the person who put it together, even if you don't know who they are. We're at the fun part, which is also the hard part, where you actually take off the wings. We have this gizmo. We're gonna hoik it up there and put it under the wing and take off the wing and put it right where I am, and it's going to be soft as landing on a cloud. Smooth. The Lindbergh bird is safely loaded up, strapped in, and ready to be shipped off to the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. Thanks to our expert staff and volunteers, we've got the upper wings tucked in on either side of the fuselage, the lower wings here on the floor end to end with cushions, and the tail feathers strapped to the sidewall of the truck. The top cylinder on the engine is like 3 inches from the roof, but we're safe, we're ready to go.
Lucky Lindy, up in the sky, fair or windy, he's flying high. Fearless, fearless, knows every cloud, the kind of a son makes a mother feel proud. Lucky Lindy rides all alone, in a little plane all his own. Lucky Lindy showed them the way, and he's the hero of them all.
If you'd like to see the Lindbergh bird in person, head on out to the Smithsonian and say hi from us. I love her, but she's always getting teeth all over me.